Welcome to the League of Duels, where we cordially gather to observe two gentle folk to resolve conflict through a demonstration of fisticuffs.
Nah, we'll just have them beat the ever-living crap out of each other. Welcome to the League of Legends Deathmatch. Take two champions, take away the meta, and pit them against each other in a duel to the death. I took it upon myself to research their lore, equipment, and abilities to see who would come out on top. No items, no summoner spells, no teams to back them up or hold them back. A 1v1 in the purest form, a deathmatch. Runeterra has many great nations spread throughout, but two tower above the rest in terms of military strength, and their rivalry has shaped the rest of the world around them, Demacia and Noxus. Though it's really more of Noxus wanting to conquer everything, and Demacia just comes up and says, "Hey, ass butt," and makes sure their plans for world domination are thwarted, at least until they try again. These confrontations produce many skilled warriors, but nobody were as skilled nor embodied their nation's values more than Garen, the Might of Demacia, and Darius, the Hand of Noxus. Let's start with Garen. Garen descends from the Crown Guard, the family that protects the crown of Demacia. It's literally right there in the name, and is sworn to protect the future king, Jarvan IV. He has won many battles in the name of Demacia, and has been trained in battle from the youngest age. He was expected to serve Demacia with his sword, and sure enough, he became a member of the Dauntless Vanguard, which is exactly what you'd expect, a bunch of heavily armed soldiers who lead the charge in battle. He earned a reputation for being one of Demacia's most skilled fighters, and is basically the poster child for Demacia and all it stands for. Now, while it may seem that Garen is just a meathead who charges in and spins to win, because he definitely does that in-game, he is actually a great warrior with a steel will and a sharp mind. He wields a sword and armor with magic-canceling properties, because Demacians hate magic. They don't like magicians. They protested the premiere of Now You See Me Too, and were frightened beyond belief during the killer clown epidemic. So see, Mom, my fear of clowns is totally justified. His passive is Perseverance, representative of his actual perseverance. Garen is notorious for fighting till he can no longer stand. Though he's never reached that point, he has returned from battle breathless after facing Katarina.
I could do this for hours. Really?
Historically, he makes every excuse to go and fight if he knows Katarina is on the battlefield. He can also use Decisive Strike. Garen charges forward and strikes a vital area of his foe, which is pretty impressive considering most humans can barely hit a high five, much less while moving. But considering most of his enemies will be heavily armored, that means that he can hit a precise weakness in their armor, all while running. You know who runs? Not you. You don't run. You know you don't. His courage is also embodied in-game as extra tankiness, and, well, most people would be able to be that brave too if you were wearing magic-resistant armor that can reduce damage at will. Heck, if I had armor like that, I would probably take up my lifelong dream of being a real-life superhero, so long as it prevents me from taking a cap in the ass. His E is Judgement, the source of the spin-to-win meme in all of its glory. He dances a dance of death with his sword. I wish I had a sword to dance with at my prom. Would have made it much more enjoyable. He's a Beyblade, a helicopter, a dadgum fidget spinner. He spins for 3 seconds, and while this may seem like a terrible battle strategy, he seems to be dexterous enough to actually pull it off. And he doesn't fall over or get dizzy. It's also capable of shredding armor. It's literally a machine gun of sword slash, and most metal doesn't last long against that. Garen's ultimate move is Demacian Justice. He is able to call upon the might of Demacia to have a giant frickin' sword come out of the sky. But one question I have is, if it's a giant sword, why does it do magic damage? Well, probably because he's summoning a giant sword out of the sky. What other explanation do you need? Garen has nothing in his lore saying that he is capable of magic, so even lore expert Necrid believes that this doesn't make any sense. Or does it? If you look at the lore more closely, you see that his younger sister Lux is a light mage. She serves Demacia with a group of their military that doesn't care that she bends light to blast their enemies, and everyone seems okay with believing that a giant Petricite Colossus just absorbed magic and was brought to life without any external force. Nope.
Not buying it.
There's gotta be more magic users in Demacia than just Lux. But since we have this evidence, it wouldn't be too far-fetched to say that Garen is capable of some kind of magic. You're a wizard, Garen. Garen even witnessed his own sister's power and was gaslighted to believe he had imagined it from a young age. While Garen is too smart to know what he saw with his own eyes, he is in constant denial because he cannot accept that his sister has the same power that once killed his uncle. Regardless of its source, he manifests this power by calling on the might of Demacia. So I guess that doesn't count, and since he doesn't hone his magic, it explains the lack of AP Garens running around one-shotting people on the rift. Supposed magical power aside, Garen is loyal to Demacia's beliefs to a fault. Even if he knows someone is evil, he will still allow them to redeem themselves. This is evident when he doesn't draw his sword on a hag who is one pull away from decapitating his own soldier. Not only that, he let her search his mind and take his memories. He is able to survive this and save his man, but at the same time, come on, you don't trust a hag. Never trust a hag. But his only other weakness other than holding up the Demacian way is his weakness for Katarina. And while he's not the smartest champion on the Rift, his prowess lies in military tactics and using his double-edged sword. He may be forgiving and just, but this is one Demacian you do not want to cross. Now let's move over to Darius. Darius's lore is actually pretty limited. Literally 2 paragraphs on this guy. He had an epic skin made off one meme about Duncan, and that's all Riot decided to leave him with. But, basically, Darius and Draven were orphaned at a young age. Like Batman, and Darius fought to keep himself and his brother alive. Not like Batman. And considering Noxus is a city that honors strength, is full of ill-willed assassins and mages, and a leader that can transform into a giant bird and eat people, you can imagine this was no easy task. But Darius and Draven survived, and Darius joined the military, though he really made a name for himself in a battle against Demacia, when his commanding officer ordered a retreat. Darius was so disgusted by his cowardice that he broke rank and decapitated him on the spot. You could say that both of them lost their heads. Heh, heh. Please don't leave. This display of strength and pride inspired and scared the living bejesus out of the rest of the company, allowing them to eventually win the battle. Now, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't mess with a guy who would execute his superior and face possible treason charges just because of principle. But once he gets home, he decides his mission is to root out the rest of those in power he deemed weak or unworthy to hold it. And since they were a bunch of nobles who only had self-interests, and his methods were incredibly violent, he was quite successful. Many thought that this meant he'd try to take the throne for himself, though he actually didn't want it. Instead, he supported Jericho Swain's rise to power, as he was a master tactician and renowned for his steel reserve, so Darius respected him as a leader. Alright kids, it's time for a fun fact of the day. Darius actually couldn't care less if he kills Garen. Now, don't get me wrong, he hates him as much as the next Demacian, and Garen probably hates him too. But Garen is someone he actually has a level of respect for, being the fearless might of his nation. Now back to Darius on the battlefield. He wields a great axe and wears Noxian armor. He has large pauldrons and armor that covers the nape of his neck up to the back of his head. So while it has the visual of an exposed head, good luck trying to get a swing at it. Darius's passive is Hemorhage, like he literally gives you a hemorrhage, and since it's a basic part of his kit, it's fair to say he's pretty good at it. His main ability is Decimate, which is exactly what will happen to you if you're anywhere near the blade of the big-ass axe he wields. No, seriously, someone made a replica of this bad boy, and it was over 100 pounds. They could barely lift it with 2 hands. However, you only have 2 directions to avoid the blade during this attack. Away from him, effectively giving him the range advantage, or towards him, where he is more than capable of using his axe to slice you to pieces. So either way, you're boned. Crippling Strike is his close combat specialty. He is known for finding and exploiting the weaknesses of his enemies, and this move allows him to literally hit an artery. Like, I looked this up, he literally hits an artery. In case you're unaware, veins are the visible blood passages on the skin, normally blue. Darius hits the artery, which is visibly undetectable, meaning Darius was able to use his battle experience to learn where the artery is well enough to put phlebotomists to shame. Darius can also use his axe to apprehend his enemies and pull them in close, giving him the upper hand when it comes to controlling the pace of the fight, and making sure his enemies can't retreat to recover or to get to a more advantageous position. something Anakin probably could have used to make sure Obi-Wan didn't get the high ground. In-game, it also gives him Armor Pin, reflecting his constant holding of his blade to ensure his weapon is in peak condition before he fights. You know, I bet he's one of those guys that names his weapons. Probably named it something like Matilda. Oh yeah, you like that Matilda, don't you? Finally, his ult is... No, we are not doing that joke. I'm sick and... Everybody get up, it's time to slay. Just kidding. That's never gonna get old. It's Noxian Guillotine. Darius leaps into the air, bringing down his axe on the poor sap who decides to die next. In-game, it's one of the most satisfying abilities, especially if you get the reset. It's like if you put heroin on an ability, it'd be Noxian Guillotine. You could argue that Garen ult is just as satisfying, but with Darius you get several, and more is always better. Especially with heroin. So I hear. I don't have a problem. Overall, Darius is a badass, and doesn't actually seem like an anti-Garen, but more like a parallel. He takes great pride in his nation and the principles it stands for, and he seeks no real power for himself other than his superior combat ability. A master on the battlefield, Darius is only inhibited by his lack of formal training. He can also be impulsive and act out of anger, as when he decapitated his leader for ordering a retreat. But that's good enough of an example to show why you don't mess with the hand of Noxus. Alright, now that you've met the champions participating in today's battle, who will win? It's time to find out.
Defy Noxus and taste your own blood.
Darius, you are a butcher, not a general.
Ha! Don't turn your back, or expose your neck.
Darius, eat your heart out.
This was a close match, but ultimately Darius had the upper hand. Get it? Because he's the hand of not. While Garen had the superior combat training, Darius had to learn how to survive in a hostile environment, meaning he is more resourceful and got his skills from combat alone. And where form would normally defeat brute strength, Darius still had his own techniques that made him effective on the battlefield. He also has a similar endurance to Garen. In his lore, the armies of Noxus had already been fighting for days, but yet Darius lopped off his general's head and led the charge again, ultimately winning the fight. Also, even though he's not as skillful and precise as Garen, he is much, much stronger. As I said earlier, he carries a 100-pound axe in one hand that a normal man can barely lift with two. He can also jump 2 to 3 stories in the air with the axe and all his armor, and he doesn't even seem to be strained doing it. So he basically has superhuman strength. Garen has a move where he jumps into the air also, but it's not nearly as impressive. Finally, Darius just had more firepower in his arsenal, because even though Demacian Justice is a magic sword that would catch him off guard, it isn't necessarily something that would be effective against someone who's grown up around magic. Garen's armor itself would make this attack weaker than it should be, as both it and his sword have magic cancelling properties. So not only would it cancel some of his ultimate's power, the magic resistance would be useless against Darius. And even though Garen had the speed advantage, Darius could just hook him back into the fight before he could catch his breath. The winner is Darius.